Direct from the web, it's Billy Masters, live. And now, please welcome your host, Billy Masters.
Oh my God, we're live. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. You will notice we are not talking to you from the studio today. We're talking to you from my sumptuous Fort Lauderdale abode. I came down to Fort Lauderdale because there were things. And oh my God, see, you're away from a show for a couple weeks and you forget the format completely. Thank you, Monica. Today is Thursday, November 26th. It is Thanksgiving Day, and this is just a spontaneous. Billy was sitting around saying, what else do I have to do? Which ironically is what Big Mama Masters has been saying to me for the past 2 weeks of my running around like crazy. So I haven't spoken to you all since the Ed Asner double feature. What a great show that was. He's so marvelous. And after we taped the shows, his son, Matt, who used to be married to Jules Asner, who is now married to Steven Soderbergh. See, so it's like 6 degrees of Soderbergh. Anyway, his son, Matt, is a producer, and he is producing a benefit for the Ed Asner Family Center Charity Foundation thing. And they're doing a virtual reading of It's a Wonderful Life. And they've got all of these stars involved, like huge amounts of stars. Perhaps I'll tell you later. If not, I'll tell you next week. But anyway, Ed Asner was a delight, and we had such great feedback. So since we last spoke, our numbers have gone through the roof. Thousands of people watch every episode. We have reached some plateau on YouTube where now we're getting ads. We're not getting money. There's like cents coming in, but whatever. We're sitting here. So before, I ended the shows and I planned on doing the week before Thanksgiving. That was the goal. And we had Eric Roberts booked and we had somebody else booked. And Eric Roberts had to cancel Tuesday and was going to come in on Thursday. Meanwhile, the morning of Monday, I got a text that there were problems here at the Filth to Go Beach House in Fort Lauderdale, which is so, as you can see, so sumptuous. I don't know if you can see this. I've got a bowl of balls. As one does. We've got little driftwood balls. We've got these iridescent balls. We've got fuzzy balls, which typically I don't like. I would take a razor blade to those. So I've got balls. Anyway, put the balls away. And then there's, I don't know what else I can show you. There's this starburst photo, a sunburst photo, like painting collage, 7-panel thing, very 70s. There's a Moroccan star, there's a fish, there's a zodiac-ish thing. Oh, there's so many things. I don't know what else I can show you. There's a wall. I don't know if I can show you this. I don't want to show you the work being done, but if you see, there is the wall of tchotchkes. And, remind me before we end the show to show you the anchor at the top. All right. Anyway, that's enough about me and my house. Anyway, so there were problems here at the house in Fort Lauderdale, and I got this frantic call saying, you've got to get down here because there are things that only you can deal with. And I hated that. So this was at noon. And I was on a flight risking life and limb to go to Florida, the belly of the beast known as COVID. And I have been here for 2 weeks now, just cleaning and working and stuff, maybe a week and a half. So I am going to be back in Boston on Monday. Tuesday, we start a new series of shows for December. I think there's only 6 shows we're doing in December. And it's going to be Billy's 12 Divas of December. I can I cannot tell you our first diva because she has not confirmed with me, but our second diva on Thursday, December 3rd, I guess, is Darlene Love. So that will be exciting. The first diva on December 1st, Tuesday, that is World AIDS Day. So we've got a special show hopefully planned. Anyway, so I was sitting here working and looking at posts on Facebook, and I saw all of these people that were just sitting home, and they were, not necessarily feeling sorry for themselves, but just bemoaning that they had nowhere to go. They were spending Thanksgiving alone. And I thought to myself, well, I'm here spending Thanksgiving alone, and I have lots of friends spending Thanksgiving alone. So why don't we just all chat and hang out and just sort of laugh a little bit, because really, what else can you do? So the first person I emailed was the first person I always email when I have this idea and I say, who will play? And it's Charles Busch. And he's like, as usual, I am happy to play. And he was the first one to get back to me as well. He's the first one in the studio. And so you're going from the warmth and glow of Fort Lauderdale to the ruby red boudoir of Mr. Charles Busch.
Hello, darling.
Hello, how are you?
I know. I always joke, though. I've been on your show so many times. If you're Ed Sullivan, I'm Topo Gigio.
I consider you Alice B. Tookless. And I'll be Gertrude Stein. Yes, exactly.
Okay.
How are you?
Fine. I wasn't moaning and groaning at all, actually.
You wrote a really lovely thing about it, that you were really okay with it, and you told a story about your Aunt Lil.
Yeah, I've never really been a big Thanksgiving person. I'm sort of the cat that walks alone anyway. But, I had a number of very glamorous Thanksgivings when I was good friends with Joan Rivers, and I used to go to her luxurious Fifth Avenue digs, and it's funny. I got to know her, and then she invited me and my partner at the time, Eric, and my sister for Thanksgiving, and I was kind of disappointed at first because I don't know, I thought Cher would be there, Barbara Walters, and it was all her. It was Joan's sister and her nieces and her business partners and her neighbors, and I was kind of disappointed. Then Eric said, don't be an asshole. We're family. So
right, exactly. That's in the circle.
And it was quite lovely. We did that for about 6 years until she died. But
I didn't know Barbara very well. I only met her once. What was she like?
Her sister
Barbara. Yeah.
Well, I gathered that she was the beautiful sister, and she was the one who was going to be the great achiever. And I guess was she a lawyer maybe or something? Or
yeah, and she was like
beautiful, brilliant. Joan was sort of the schlubby sister, who was always desperate to get the parents' approval. But I guess by the time I met the sister, she was old and fragile and rather quiet,
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't really. She didn't make too much of an impression on me. I think.
Yeah, I found the same thing.
Life, I think, maybe had beat her down a bit. Yeah.
Well, it's so funny. I met her a few times backstage with Joan, and I just remember they were studies in contrast, that Joan was so outgoing and she was very mousy, Barbara, and very meek and really kept to herself. But also, I wondered if I was in her environment, if she would have been more outgoing.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, it probably was a bit of a complex relationship of dominance and submission.
Oh, which we know something about.
Yeah.
So the last time I talked to you on the show, we talked about you were going off to film your movie in quarantine. You, Julie Halston, Margaret Cho, who else was in it? It's your whole cast of characters.
Yeah, Tim Daly, and then just wonderful Broadway people, Andre DeShields, Patrick Page, Heather McRae, Dee Hotie, Katie Huffman. It's a great cast. Yeah, and they all really really delivered. Yeah, it was kind of nutty. I mean, the whole thing came about so quickly. Carl Andrus, who's been
Your
my
fabulous director,
collaborator and dear friend, for 20 years, and we co-wrote the movie, co-directed, and I'm in it, and it all was so fast. I mean, a year ago, I don't think it even existed as an idea.
really? Was it that fast?
That fast. Wrote the script, have our one investor who financed it, and then hooked up with a very fascinating young producer named Ash Christian, who then a few weeks before we began shooting suddenly died suddenly without any warning.
Was it COVID related?
No, to tell you honestly, it's a little mysterious. I never found out exactly what it was, but he was only 35 years old. So, but it was shocking. But somehow we didn't lose even a day. That he had a really excellent team of co-producers, people working with him, who then jumped up and took over.
Well, and again, what people have to understand is when you do something like this, you've locked in, particularly at the beginning of the shoot, you locked in studio time that you have like X amount of days. You have to be very economical. So losing even an hour could be disastrous.
Yeah. And it was most indie films that I've been involved in, the shooting schedule is very tight, but it's about 20 days, 21 days. This was 15 days.
And how many in studio?
It was kind of nutty. And then we had all these, very intense COVID protocols. We were, we were tested so many every 3 days. I just kept, Q-tips up my nose just permanently, And actually, it was kind of, it was a different kind of COVID test. I'd been used to the one I'd had where they stuck the long
straight up, yeah.
But they just had this lovely woman. I never actually saw her face because she was always masked. But from here up, she was very.
It sounds like people I've slept with.
But
I couldn't identify them in a police lineup.
Well, she was very lovely, and it was the test that they give you was rather erotic and
erotic
and tender at the same time. It took the regular Q-tip and just very sensuously 15 times just massaged just the very tip of your nostril.
Concentric circles or counterclockwise
circles?
I
loved it. I could me next.
I could just see your new book, Love in the Time of COVID.
We had to do it every 3 days. It was kind of nutty because we, on one hand, we were all being so careful. We always had to be masked and this and but then I very sexy Tim Daly is
very sexy.
I ended up the first day I met him, we were in bed together. And
how was he in bed?
Unmasked, yeah. So it's kind of strange because here I was, in bed with him for about 3 hours, and then we got out of bed and immediately had to put our masks on. So it was kind of kooky.
Did you get to make out with Tim Daly?
I was caressing him and in bed with him, it was quite wonderful. But in the movie, he seduces Julie Halston and me separately, and so he had me first, and then a week later he was in bed with Julie, and I got kind of jealous.
I would hope so.
I was thinking, I thought he was mine, and I had to give her direction, and I was like, "Oh, darling, I think the next take, don't be so sexy. I think it's funnier if you're not sexy at all."
Or, maybe you wouldn't be as into Julie as you were into me.
I know. He's so nice. He was just lovely, but I just was sitting there just kind of soured. Like,
Well, Julie had posted some videos from the set, from coming like down that long staircase.
Yeah.
And she was getting this was when you were in the warehouse, and it just almost looked like you were like in a real studio. It was, yeah.
Oh, yes. And
it looked so professional. Fabulous.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, it's just these beautiful new movie studios in Fishkill, New York, called Umbra.
Where is that?
Fishkill is about an hour or so outside New York City, hour and a half. It's like near Rhinebeck. And
can you just say that again? You said hour and a half.
Yeah, an hour and a half. Well, I was
you said it like you were in a play. Hour and a half. It was just like the cadence was lovely. Anyway, all right.
Anyway, most indie films, and certainly the ones that I was involved in, were all shot on location. And you do 2 days in a studio, which is part of a tax incentive thing.
Sure.
But in this case, because of the COVID thing, we shot basically all the interiors in a studio, and it was very cool. It was like being in Warner Brothers in 1932, and we had these very elaborate apartments. We had 2 different apartment sets that were complete apartments with kitchen and bathroom, and it was really quite wonderful. And then we did 5 days.
And originally, weren't you supposed to do some of those apartments in actual New York City apartments? When
Carl and I wrote this script, it was before the pandemic, and we thought to keep the costs down that we would actually write a story that we could shoot in just my apartment and other people's apartments.
Right.
And then all this happened, and that seemed wrong. So the whole thing was going to be shot on soundstage, and so much better too, because I can't even imagine having a whole crew in this tiny apartment. It would have just been awful. But we did shoot like Margaret Cho's apartment in the movie. She's supposed to have a very high end kind of Tribeca loft kind of thing. So we found a beautiful apartment in right near where the studio is in Beacon, New York, and this painter had a beautiful apartment. So we used that for that set, and a couple other places. Then we shot 5 days in Manhattan doing exteriors, including my own building.
Really?
Yeah, it was kind of crazy, but yeah, it was really cool. I mean, it was a fantasy. I've always had this fantasy, as long as I can remember, of wanting to shoot a real wacky caper movie with lots of running around and in disguises and shooting it here in Greenwich Village where I live. I just it was a dream, and something. There's Julie and I, and I'm dressed up in this kind of looking like Capuchin or something, 60s drag. And Julie's in male drag with a mustache on, and we're running down the street and being chased, and it was something I just always fantasized about doing. And
it sounds like sort of a film version of a Charles Busch play.
Well, kind of. I mean, it's not we're not doing a parody or homage specifically to any kind of movie genre like Die Mommy Die was early 60s suspense movies. This is a contemporary movie. It's set today, and but it evokes a bit of the style of, let's say, some of those British comedies from the Elaine Studios in the early 60s.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah, and like Make Mine Mink. I don't know if you knew that, but it's just kind of it's set in the milieu of very eccentric classic movie collectors. And I play this fellow, Jimmy, who's a rather disreputable dealer of movie memorabilia. And he stumbles across this reel of a lost silent film that's so coveted, by collectors, and it's thought to not have existed. And he stumbles on it, and then various people try to
hilarity ensues.
Try to steal it from him, and he has to steal it back. And hilarity ensues. Yeah, it was a ball, and working with all these wonderful actors who just were so thrilled, I think, to be working again.
Well, that's the thing is, in a way, you've got a captive cast. Well, literally had a captive cast.
Yeah. Well, there were people.
I was just going to say that
we wouldn't have gotten if
really? Well, because they were now available. Sure.
They were in Broadway shows, and now they were available. Yeah.
You mentioned Make Mine Mink. This has nothing to do with you, but I have a story apropos of Make Mine Mink, which I've never told. I have, and who doesn't have a Make Mine Mink story?
Wow.
So I don't want to say who, but there's a member of my family who's married, a male member of my family who's married to a female, a very close family member. And they were over our house for Thanksgiving, perhaps, or Christmas. And we've always thought that the male member of the family was gay. He was very light. He was very persnickety. He had all the Barbra Streisand albums, all the original Broadway cast albums, had a poster collage of Betty Davis, but, married, as one did in the 50s or 60s.
Right. Yeah.
And so he comes over to the house for dinner and with his wife. And my mother is making dessert, serves dinner. We have dinner. We're having dessert. And he's not having dessert because this week I have given up sweets. And I'm like, okay, but he's married to this woman who is, slightly rotund, one of my favorite relatives, but slightly rotund. And at a moment, he turns and says to my mother, would you mind if I excuse myself and go to the TV? Because tonight they're showing one of my favorite movies, Make Mine Mink. At which point his wife took another slice of cake. And to this day, has never come out. They're still married, but I'm like, okay, really?
And I guess some people made very good marriages. I mean, it's strange, but I guess
I think a lot of people were in marriages like that, particularly of an earlier generation, and were married to, say, their best friend, and that worked, and that's an arrangement. Yeah. And sometimes I wonder, being married to one's best friend is kind of what we all aspire to, in a sense.
Yes, I think so. To me, I guess, I don't know, the dream husband would be someone that I was wildly attracted to, had lots
and could watch Make Mine Mink with.
Yes, and had a lot in common with, had a similar frame of reference, who I really could be great friends with. I mean, I guess that's hard to find.
Have you stayed friends with exes?
What, have I stayed friends? Yes, actually. Well, Eric Myers, who was my partner for 23 years, we had the most amicable kind of breakup. I think, we never lived together. It was always, a bit of an eccentric situation, but I think we at a certain point felt that we were being kinder to our friends than we were to each other, and then maybe we'd be nicer to each other if we were friends, and we've stayed friends. And he's very close to my sister, and he's a wonderful person. So,
did you become kinder to each other when you stopped the romantic relationship?
We don't see each other as often as, even though we live in the same city, as that one would think. But we go to the movies sometimes, and we get together and we talk. And we're very supportive of each other. His career, actually, he became much more successful after he broke up with me. Yeah. So I don't know.
How nice for him.
Yeah. He's doing great. Yeah. So yeah.
Did you? I'm always curious because in my case, the people that I've missed being in a relationship with, I end up missing more the friendship and the camaraderie and the things you had in common more than the romance. And I wonder if that's the case for a lot of people.
I don't know. But one of the great things about our relationship was that I think we found each other kind of endlessly fascinating, and he has so many interests. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of a one focused kind of guy. It's just been the theater, film, whatever, my career, my work, creative life. But with Eric, he's as interested in old movies as he is with architecture, as he is with opera, as with a number of He's part of the Wooden Roller Coaster Enthusiast Society. So,
Really?
yeah, and I would always
That's fascinating.
And it was always interesting for me. Any time I was with him, and I asked, "What did you do today?" I really wanted to know because it was something interesting. Or he would take trips to, and it's funny. I never learned my lesson ever. He would, because he's written books on Art Deco and 30s Art Deco. He would sometimes go to sort of undeveloped cities like Tulsa or Kansas City that had not had big urban renewal projects where they tore down all the old buildings to create.
So they're still existing.
Yes, and so they were kind of slightly depressed cities, but he could see all sorts of wonderful things. And he would ask me if I'd want to go with him to Tulsa or Kansas City. I said, that's all right. And then he'd come back and I'd, be kind of smirking and, and how was it? What did you see? And then he started to saying, oh, well, we went to this old vaudeville house and they had all this
I love
backdrop and we saw the ropes and the things and oh, really? And he goes, yes. And I went to the birthplace of Vivian Vance. You did? And so wonderful. And I thought, damn, I should have gone. And I never learned my lesson. Every time it was the same thing we played. I don't think so. And he had a wonderful time.
There's a great website. I forget what it's called. I think it's Forgotten Cinemas or Forgotten Theaters. And it has, people who are devotees of those old theaters and pictures of them when they were in their heyday and then what they look like now. And I think to myself, I love going into old theaters. It's one of my favorite things in Europe in particular. I love doing that.
Well, and I think actually what seems to be happening over the past 20 years is that number of these places that had been either turned into shopping malls or rehab
or swap shops,
but now they're actually being restored to their former glory and turned into art centers. And yes, that's happening more and more.
I love that.
Down completely. Man, I'm fascinated by a movie theater that was right evidently around the corner from me here in the West Village, where there was a Lowe's Sheridan that was a big old movie palace that was one of the theaters that Edward Hopper, the painter, used to use as model for some of those famous paintings of the Usher. And it was torn down in '69, and I think I actually, as a kid, saw a movie there, before.
Wow.
And this is kind of funny. I don't know, it probably says about my lack of curiosity, but I'm fascinated by this theater, and I see the space where it was, the block that's now AIDS Memorial Park, and I keep wondering.
Oh, okay, I know where.
Yeah, and I keep imagining where would it seems awfully small for this big movie palace, and where would be the front? Where was the front, and where? Little did I know, there's outside my door. On my floor, we've got old photographs of Greenwich Village, and literally next to my front door, is a photo of Lowe's Sheridan. And I have
wow!
I'm such an asshole that
and you never noticed.
For years walking, I've just never looked at the photographs on my floor. I've been up there for 15 years, and there it is. Really, I gotta keep my eyes open.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's probably something you pass by every day of the last things you notice. We have so many messages from people. Shishi LaRue, happy Thanksgiving. Horse Shishi, I sent you a link. Come and join us, please. We would love to see you. John McDonald tells us, I dressed D. Hody. Look, I don't need to know about your sex life, John McDonald.
A wonderful actress.
Kenny, she is, isn't she? Kenny Morse, happy Thanksgiving. Jerome Cleary, happy Thanksgiving. Lovely people. John McDonald knows, has perfect skin. Charles, you have perfect skin.
Not bad. I must say, the thing with this Zooming is that I get
lighting. It's all about lighting.
I've got this, Zoom light, ring light going on.
Oh, the ring light, yeah.
Yeah, but I find I get distracted by my own beauty. It's hard. I just posing. And there was a reunion I did a Zoom reunion with all these people went to summer camp theater camp with me, and I hadn't seen them
How
all.
old were you when you went to theater camp?
Or let's say, 14.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, so we had this reunion, and there were, oh God, like 20 squares of Zooming. And I don't know, I just found myself just sitting back, just preening. Terrible. So, what'd you say? What'd you say? Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, if anybody takes this still, at least it will be one where you look good. Every once in a while, I'll find myself doing this. I'll take the Marilyn May pose. Hello, Tom. And then usually if I'm not into it, the sides of my face go down and I'm like this. It's like a stroke victim a little. So I try not to do that.
Well, invariably somebody does do a screen capture where you're like,
the worst part of these shows, every single show, is I have to come up with a thumbnail for each show. And to find one where everybody looks good, sometimes I fudged because it's an impossibility.
Yeah.
Did I read, it's so funny. You would think like I couldn't just pick up the phone and talk to you any day of the week, but I don't. But we will text with each other or email with each other. I haven't talked to you about it. You finally finished your memoir.
I don't know if I did or not, really. I don't know. I tell you, my problem is, I'm not, I don't really see myself as a prose writer. And so in my direct field, which is playwriting, and even acting, I'm kind of fearless. I'll just, I'll just try anything, and I'm pretty sure of what I think I'm doing. But in other disciplines, I don't know what you want to call it. I'm just I'm as insecure as anybody else, and so with this book, which I've been working on for about 6 years or so, off and on, I listen to the last person I talked to. And so if somebody reads it, I give it to somebody to read, and they say, "Oh, I think the whole thing should, be blah 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 blah." Oh yeah, okay. Then I go back and I rearrange it, and so I don't know what I have. I've got a wonderful new literary agent who's trying to find a publisher for it. And
what is the feedback from the literary agent? Because I would trust them.
He really likes it, but we just we submitted it to a very, very, very prestigious editor.
Imprint.
Yes, and I was shocked that he got it to her, but they were great friends. And anyway, she had all sorts of suggestions, and thought I should kind of go back to the drawing board a bit. And when I first read it, I was just like, and then when I calmed down the next morning, I reread it. I thought, oh, that's actually pretty smart. And he and I just spoke on the phone yesterday, and I'm actually kind of excited about going back into it and doing more work. And it's new for me. I haven't written memoirs before. So
I know that. Although you've written great short stories that are personal.
Well,
does that help?
Well, Facebook has been this very great help to me. And
you had that essay published. Where was it in?
New Yorker.
New Yorker, right?
That was a chapter from my book that.
Okay. Oh, it is. Okay.
Well,
that was great.
Tom Judson, who's you know very well, and he's the most fascinating person. He's my musical director for my Cabaret act. And he's a great porn star, and I mean he's just fascinating
composer, musician, builder.
Anyway, he's thought that that one chapter that I've written it could be fashioned into a standalone short story essay, and he knew someone who knew someone who knew someone at the New Yorker, and usually that never pans out at all. I've had that before. Rather humiliating, actually. But anyway, I did what he said, and he helped me kind of hone it in shape. And anyway, it was published in the New Yorker last August, and that was just unbelievable. I still can't quite believe that I had a story in the New Yorker. It was thrilling.
It's funny. I've been working on a personal writing project as well, and I read tons of autobiographies and memoirs. And the one that struck me as one of the most successful was Andrea Martin's, because each of them were standalone short stories that were really self-contained and overlap. And that way it's more of a collection of anecdotes.
Well, I think a lot of people are doing that. I think Tina Fey and I think Lena Dunham, that seems to be kind of the trend. And I'm thinking maybe, I did that. You know, I one of the versions of this book, I did do that, and then I gave it to Tom Judson.
Again.
And he said that he thought that there was a linear memoir in there that was kind of struggling to come out, and I thought maybe he's right. So then I spent another 7 months filling in,
fully adapted it, right?
Yeah, to make it a linear thing. But now it seems that maybe that's not the way I should have gone. So I don't know. So I may go back sort of to the earlier version, but I've also learned from doing the linear version, there are things that I can take from that were very, very helpful. But I think one of the things I was a little worried about was being kind of nasty, you know, and sort of
what way?
Well, just telling stories about people who are still alive who, you know, were difficult.
But they're true.
Difficult to work with or various things. And I guess I didn't really do that. And that's not really, and I'm not really a cunty person, you know, I'm really kind of not, you know, and sometimes I think I've actually disappointed people at times, particularly earlier in my career when I think I was introduced to people who assumed because of my drag persona, you know, on stage that in real life I was going to be this very, you know, dog sort of person who's, you know, just, you know,
with the snappy comebacks,
and insult thing, and I'm that's never really been my thing. And even in my plays, you know, I don't really do insult humor.
No, you're snappy comebacks and crisp.
Yeah, and you know, and often I found back in the day when I would meet people like that, they try to engage me into a kind of a, you know, insult thing, and I don't know, I just start, oh, my feelings are kind of hurt. Yeah, so that's just not who I am. But I do think there are
there stories that are like, you know, story that, you know, you feel is really germane to your story, that that you may like the person, but they don't come off looking particularly good in it?
Yeah.
I mean, those are the kinds of stories.
Yeah.
But see, again, if it's somebody you're genuinely affectionate to, but it's just not positive towards them, I don't think that's cunty.
I think there's a way of doing it too. I do think there's a way of, everything is context, as they say, and I think there's a way of that explaining how this person may have behaved badly,
poorly,
but it also is because of the stress they're under.
Mm-hmm.
Or what?
Do you have any example you could use? Any example?
Well, I've never really talked about. I wrote the book to a new book to the musical Taboo, which had been a big hit in London, and then Rosie O'Donnell produced it in New York on Broadway and brought me in to write a new book to it, and it was kind of one of the major Broadway disaster flops of.
And there's a great documentary about it that people should see. About the 4 musicals that were new musicals that year. I forget the name of it.
Taboo though in it, because one of the problems there was that Rosie was going to make her own documentary, and she had the cameras going a lot during, and then so she didn't want this other production team to be shooting the same footage that she was going to make herself, and then but the problem there was just that none of us were going to be very honest, because knowing that the boss is looking at all the footage each night, and it was so fraught with drama that she realized that really all she had was kind of a puff piece. So consequently, she never did her documentary, and so our participation in there, that outside documentary was rather minimal. It was mostly just following you and Morton around town. So yeah,
which was so tragic. I remember watching that. I watched it recently when COVID began, and I just remember being heartbroken for Ewan, because at that point he's basically being deported. He has to leave. And Raoul's frustration through that whole thing, which I remember vividly because I remember meeting him. I was with David Drake. We went to a preview and we saw him at Joe Allen's afterwards. And I thought he was brilliant, Raoul. And I went up to him and told him, and he just was so frustrated. He just let out on us. You don't know what we've gone through. And we had this, I'm like, wow. Okay.
Yeah, no, it was just awful. I mean, it's really up there with the most miserable experiences of my entire life, to be quite honest. And I
hate to laugh.
I know. I mean, it's up there with my mother's death and my heart surgery is among the most unpleasant moments of my life, you know. And yeah, there was, a few years ago, there was a 10-year reunion at 54 Below of people getting up and doing songs from it. And I was invited. I said, no, thank you. And I just,
did Rosie go?
Did she actually go? I'm not sure if she did. But I responded. The thing is, you know, she really was the fall guy in a way. I mean, people just were, the critics were so going after her, and I like her. I came out of it.
And she was being sued at the time about the magazine, so that overshadowed everything.
Yes, and so she was under terrible stress, and I think just everything, and she was in an impossible situation, and so, you know, and she's a tempestuous personality. But out of the whole thing, I have to say, I really like her. She's a great person, and honestly, she treated me beautifully, you know. But you know, she's a complicated, uncensored person, and her enthusiasms are epic, and her anger is epic. Uncensored. And so, but she's, on the other hand, she's exactly on the level. I mean, there's nothing tedious about her at all. It's just, So I mean, I could write about, you know, I never wrote about it because wouldn't want to hurt her, because I really like her. But I
think there's a way to do that.
And I think she's pretty honest with herself too. I think maybe I would, if I did write a chapter about it, maybe I would send it to her and ask her if there's anything in it that you know, she'd rather me not say. But I bet she wouldn't.
That's a good way to do it. Yep.
She's so direct. I don't think she'd want to be sort of, you know, smoothed over and all that. Boy George, on the other hand, you know, is not one of my favorite people. So I guess I wouldn't feel bad about talking about how impossible he was. Yeah.
Was he impossible? Because I felt that Rosie was so in awe of him that she couldn't wrangle him the way she should have.
He meant a great deal to her. You know, I think growing up this sort of lonely gay girl on Long Island, he represented kind of a gay identity and being who you are, and all sorts of things, and very talented. So so I think that she was maybe perhaps a bit intimidated. Yeah. And then also in position too, because, you know, she, as a producer, I mean, at one point things were kind of moving along, and we just had, we're in almost final previews, and while you're in previews, you can still rehearse the cast during the day if you need to put in last minute changes. But the union, Actors Equity, allows just certain hours, because, you know, they're performing at night. They can't just be rehearsing all day,
sure,
you know, all day, all the time. So there's certain hours that are allotted that you can do these changes. And so you have to be very careful and think, okay, we have to, what is on our list of things we absolutely have to do? And so you have to parcel them out. Oh, the last number, end of the show needs to be worked on. So that we'll use that, you know. But anyway, so things were kind of working out, moving along. Okay, then suddenly George announced that he hated the whole ending of the first act, which was actually, I think, one of the more successful parts of the show. And we were, you know, it was kind of a crazy show for the people who didn't know it, because it was about the Boy George's early days
in the London club scene.
And the two main characters were the young Boy George and then this fascinating performance artist designer Lee Bowery. Boy George was the real Boy George was playing Lee Bowery, and this very talented young actor Ewan Morton was playing the young Boy George. So anyway, and we were being very careful that we did not want to present Ewan as a Boy George impersonator. That we wanted this character really to be just a real character, and so we were very careful about that. Well, George just was adamant that he just hated the end of the first act, and he came up with his own scenario, and he's not a writer, and it was just awful. And it totally presented Ewan as it suddenly turned into like a mega mix of Boy George hits, and suddenly Ewan was a Boy George impersonator. And so, and it was awful. And I said to Rosie, I said, I could try to do it, but you're not going to like it. And she said, well, we're in a terrible problem because he won't go on stage. He was just like, and just he won't show up unless we do this. And I went to him and I begged him, and he's just like this intransigent sort of Buddha. And so anyway, so I said, okay, I'll do the best I can, but it's not going to be good. And I tried. I did the best I can, but it was loud, And then we use our remaining hours with the cast to put in this ridiculous thing, and we're stuck. That's it. There's no more time to change it. And we put it in, and Rosie sees the first performance, and she flips out. She says, it's horrible, change it. And I said, well, I don't like the Pan Am building. Would you please tear it down for me? Can you do that for me for tomorrow? We have no more time. That's it. I told you. So that was it. And then sure enough, wouldn't you know, that the New York Times Review, which was horrible, said reduced you and just saying, well, he's just a Boy George impersonator,
which is what you're trying to avoid.
And he is so talented and
he is such a talented actor
and gave a great
and a lovely person.
Great performance.
Jesse Pierce asks us, what Jeff Calhoun changes stuck?
Well, that was a strange situation. That we had a very talented choreographer, Mark Dendy, who was very much from the world of modern dance and very, very talented. And he's had a wonderful career. And this was his first Broadway show. And it was a rather interesting hire on Rosie's part to have him. She felt that his choreography was too kind of angry, and it's funny in a way. It was very much a precursor of what's now is basically standard Broadway choreography, which has hip hop, feeling and
a melange of styles.
Hadn't really seen that before, so he was kind of ahead of his time. She wasn't responding to it at all, and so she brought in Jeff Calhoun, who's a real Broadway choreographer and really knows how to create
sell a song
and create musical sequences. And she'd worked with him in the revival of Grease, and he's a great guy. And so she brought him in, and Mark Dendy behaved very beautifully. That here he was being replaced, but he decided to kind of stay on as almost kind of assistant choreographer. Well, first of all, I think he wisely wanted to get the Broadway salary, but he behaved impeccably. And so Jeff Calhoun, analyzing the problem, felt that it wasn't just steps that needed to be changed. It was that, the whole opening of the first act and the second act particularly needed to be a whole kind of be more musicalized, where with the synthesis of bits of dialogue and dance, and so it's all a cohesive whole. And it was, I think, the original with Mark Denny might have been a little more, dance number, dialogue, dance number, So I don't want to be unfair to Mark Dendy, who's a talented fellow, but anyway, that was sort of the idea that Jeff Calhoun did, but then there was a strange interim period where Jeff, while he was going to rehearse the company to put in all this new material, he decided to take out some of the existing choreography. So there were a couple performances where the ensemble just would come on and freeze.
Because they had nothing to do.
He didn't want them to do the old stuff, but he hadn't given them the new stuff yet. So they're just and
again, that's what people don't understand seeing a show if they're not familiar with things. Is that, especially during previews, things that change. Every performance can be different.
Yeah. So then, so it's kind of funny. So after this one horrible performance, where the interim thing, Rosie, we're a bunch of us just on the stage, and she had just spent all day in court. Being sued by her publishers, and the horrible pictures are the cover of the front page of her, are just awful. And I just felt awful. I think she may have been kind of over medicated with anxiety medication to get through just this awful, humiliating situation. And so there she's, we're all sitting there just kind of like defeated. And the last thing we needed was suddenly the women's chorus grievance committee comes in. Oh no! And and they're all crying. It's like we're so humiliated going on stage and and it's like this is the last thing we need to hear right now. And Rosie just has to, this is the moment where she's supposed to do the give this big stirring speech to the troops.
Right.
She's just so like zombied out and worn, just beaten down. This poor girl.
Yeah. These moments, and we've seen it in so many documentaries of shows coming together. A strong producer with enthusiasm and a vision can rally a cast together. But if you don't have that center, it can just fall apart, because who's running this show?
Well, she did fell. I mean, now thing is with Rosie though, she'd read those books, and so she wanted very much to be the kind of David Merrick, and she was very, very aggressive, and a lot of there were people who found her too aggressive and too dominating, So yeah, she was very much like, I'm the conductor and you're the oboe and you're the violin, No, she was. It's just that this one day she was beaten down. And she had to make the big speech, and we're all thinking, "Oh, what's she going to do?" And so she goes up there and she starts rambling on about with the theater when she was a child, at the theater, seeing Pippin changed my life, and I just felt so awful for her, but she made this point with Mark Shaman. Why is she bringing up Mark Shaman? Mark Shaman, that genius who gave the world hairspray.
Look, we all invoke Mark Shaman.
Heat shark Mark Shaman could not get a ticket for the opening night of Boy from Oz. I want to change that. We're all and then she finishes this poor thing. Down figure finishes the speech, and at that point, like we're all like, and I think she puts out her hand like we're supposed to do the thing, and we're all just so like. So nobody moves, and so I, the book writer, I can't. So I put my hand on her hand, and then slowly, then there's yay team, and nobody says a word, and then poor Rosie, she just turns and she walks down the steps off the stage, followed by one of her lesbian minions, and she just walks out of the theater, and we're all looking at each other, like, what the hell just happened? And then suddenly the little minion runs down the aisle and says, Rosie, just put the steps back in. It was crazy, but the thing is,
I think there might be a whole book in the taboo experience.
There was after the whole thing happened, and and it was so lambasted and ran, 100 performances and longer than it should have. But Rosie just kept pouring money in it because she believed it, and she felt guilty.
It would catch on.
And she felt guilty. I mean, she's a great gal, and that's the thing.
Right.
She felt
loves
she felt bad after she'd lost $10 million of her own money. She was the sole investor. She felt bad that she was putting them all out of work. So she kept the show running as long as she could, and paying for Boy George's expensive apartment in New York City, and Ewan and just keeping it going until finally, her accountant said, "You got to close it, honey." So she did, but just out of and George then started saying, "Oh, she's throwing me out. She's throwing me out." I mean, she was so good to him.
Right.
Yeah.
One of my favorite on paper, one of my favorite collaborations you did was the third story with Kathleen Turner. Was it the third story?
Yeah.
And yet, because in my dreams, I would want to see you and Kathleen Turner doing something together, and it wasn't exactly what I had hoped it would be. And I'm curious, how was she to work with?
Oh, I'm fond of her. I like her.
I like her very much as well. Although she did say she would not enjoy being on this show.
Really?
Yes.
I'm surprised because you're.
But Marilyn May said to her, "Yes, you would." So thank you, Marilyn May.
Yeah, because you're so respectful. You wouldn't be.
I adore her.
Or something. No, she's a great gal. She's tough, smart. Woman. At one point, I went out with her after the show. I went out with her and Kate Mulgrew to the Cowgirl Hall of Fame restaurant. I'm sitting there with these two big Irish broads, and they're drinking, and I felt like such a fragile little, Estelle Winwood, next to these two. I said, I'm miscast. I should be Brian Dennehy, because they were just like, oh my running. I got to put the thing in.
That's okay.
But no, she's a great guy. The problem was that this play was not. It was a complicated play that was commissioned by the. Put this plug in.
Manhattan Theater.
No, it was commissioned by La Jolla Playhouse. And
okay.
La Jolla with different act with Mary Beth Peale, and then in New York, the MCC Theater produced it at the Lucille Hotel, and we recast and. We kind of needed a bigger name, and so we got Kathleen. But the thing is that the way that it was three stories that were intertwined, and so it wasn't created for a second real star. So Kathleen and I were on stage together for maybe
4 minutes.
Minutes of the whole running time.
I kept waiting for it. I know.
She had big scenes with other people, and I had big scenes with other people, but we only kind of collided, for about 6 minutes. So that was a big disappointment for people who thought that would be kind of a fun thing to see.
I did too.
But it wasn't written that way. It was,
right.
And it wasn't written for the idea that we'd have, Kathleen Turner.
Did she enjoy doing your kind of play? I mean, was it a good experience for her?
Well, I don't think so, because she was in a terrible physical condition. Her rheumatoid arthritis was.
Oh, have we lost Charles Busch?
Kind of like.
Oh, you're coming back, I think.
Yeah, hi there. Yeah.
Are you back, darling?
Yeah, I'm back. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, she had many physical problems and then at one point thought she was have to leave. Closed, but then she decided that she could do it if she never had to walk up a single step. And it was a problem because the theater, to get to the stage, you had to go up the steps. So we had to create this little tent just right behind the set. It was isolated. It was just a bad situation for her, but I like her a lot. And after that, somehow, I think I just got her in this bad window, because then after that she was doing solo shows and
exactly
and big stuff. And so she's I got her just at a bad window. But
did you ever work with Stritch?
Just one night benefit.
A benefit, right?
Number of them. Oh, she was just a wild character. I mean, she was so true to her persona that any 5 minutes you had with her, it defined her character. So if I met her 12 times, I have 12 stories. But one of them with the first two, though, I'll just tell you quickly. It was just that I was invited. They used to have, I don't think they do it anymore, but for a while there was this big women of the theater luncheon at the Rainbow Room, and it was all just women of theater and just actors and producers and publicists and one year they invited me as the only male there to make a speech, and so I decided to do it in drag. So I came in this faux Chanel suit and hat and and gloves, and I did a speech about how actresses been the great inspiration for me on stage, off stage. And so when I finished and I was coming off the podium, I kind of collided to Elaine Stritch, who I'd never met, and she was just like, just that was genius. Who is a genius that asked you to come here? That was brilliant. Jesus Christ, I think I'm in love with you. And so then about a few months later, we were both on the bill for a fundraiser in Sag Harbor, New York, and I arrived, and there was Stritch, and reading a magazine, and I was just as myself. So I always reintroduced myself to everybody anyway, So I went over. I said, Elaine, it's Charles Busch. She looked up and says, I recognize you. You're not that good.
Did she go to one of your plays and leave it intermission, but leave you a note that said, if the second act's as good as the first one or something?
Well, this is the same play, the third story, the same thing with
was it? Oh, okay.
Campaign. Yeah, well, so over the years I kept running into her, and I knew she liked me in her real salty kind of way, but she'd never actually seen me in a play, and I wanted her to think I was talented, not just the nice gay boy, So anyway, so I was doing this play, and it's our closing Sunday matinee, and the phone rings. That's Elaine Stritch. I thought, how the hell did she get my number? These people, they can always find you if they want. And she was, it's Elaine. I want to see your show today. I said, well, I'll set you up with a ticket. You don't have to do that. I never get a ticket. I just walk in. I'll set you up with a ticket. So then we're doing the performance, and then when it's over, the house manager says, Elaine Stritch left during intermission. She had a diabetic attack. So, okay. So I get home, and there's a message on my answering machine. Charles, it's Elaine. Sorry I had to leave. I was having a diabetic attack. I gather this wasn't one of your finer efforts, but you're a real artist. So,
did you save the message, please?
Yes. So I just... So that was kind of what I wanted to hear, and so I accept that. But she was just an outrageous person, but so true to that. She was just always that lady.
Well, again, I think that you've also worked with people. They're people that you revere, and when you worked with Polly Bergen, I would expect that's a similar kind of dynamic.
Well, Polly Bergen was kind of Elaine Stritch minus the arsenic. Because they were similar in certain, both kind of like
broads.
They're the ladies, But Polly there was just a sweetness and a kind of a generosity.
And you worked with her on a film.
Yeah, she starred in a movie that I wrote and directed and acted in called Very Serious Person,
which is lovely. What a lovely
she
film!
Was just great. I adored her, and she if only she was alive to be on your show, because she had the best stories, and she had met everyone. She'd known everyone, and so every day during the lunch break, she would just regale us, and there'd be a theme to the day. Great singers she'd known. So
wow!
You were talking about Sinatra. Great gangsters that she'd known. Because in her early days in Vegas, she knew all the,
a great Sam Giancana story.
Yes,
exactly.
Every day it was, great comedians that she'd known. She was like Scheherazade. I mean, it was just fascinating. And one just funny story is that we were shooting this movie in a real house in Rockaway. This very, very quiet older neighborhood, and they were not too pleased with us, with our big trucks blocking their where their cars were and everything, and
driveways and things.
And so it was getting, and particularly the older women of the neighborhood were taking, just sort of standing outside, grim faced, and so we were getting a little nervous. So we just sent Polly Bergen outside to calm the mob, and so she goes out there, and well, she was a huge star to them, and so they're all running outside, and Abner, Polly Bergen's outside, and they'd come out with their old Polly Bergen albums, and suddenly she's signing things, and it's 1962, and she's signing and telling stories and being just fabulous, and so they're softening up. So I come out and I tell them, I said, ladies, we're going to be shooting a night scene, very late tomorrow night. Where there's a scene where Polly is being carried out of the house on a stretcher, and we would love if you'd be extras in our movie, and just come out, in your bathrobes and your hair in curlers, and just be like you're curious what's going on. So everybody's all excited about it. So the next night we're set up. We got everything. We got the ambulance, whatever, and Polly in the stretcher, and all the ladies come out, and they're in evening gowns with and just all done up like they're going to the Oscars. Oh, it's not the idea, honey.
Well, if you're going to be in a Polly Bergen movie, you want to turn it out. Was there anybody of that type around during the 80s and 90s and 2000s that you wanted to work with but just couldn't for whatever reason?
Well, I was never, the plays
like Stritch. Did you ever want to do a play with Stritch and it just never happened?
No, because I had my company and we were just doing plays with us, and I was the leading lady, and there didn't really lend itself to. It was kind of a lovely period while it lasted, where I just had this group with Julie Halston and Andy Halliday, and there were just 8 of us, and I just kept writing plays for the same 8 people, and that's what we did. So I have to say I'm rather proud of the fact that from 1985 to 92, I kept all these people with insurance and constantly employed.
There's only one leading lady of a Charles Busch play. And that's Charles Busch.
Man, nobody feathers their nest in a Charles Busch play.
I don't care if you are Elaine Stritch.
Yeah. Can that little broad's tail.
It's funny. I thought of you. I don't know. I guess it was 2 or 3 weeks ago. I had Everett Quinton on, and Brian Belovich, because they had done a benefit reading of "Boys Don't Wear Lipstick," and I could have talked to Everett forever because I would have been so interested in discussing Charles Ludlam and that whole theater. That was how inspired by them were you?
Oh, enormous! I guess really Charles Ludlam I would say is my main, inspiration. I was so young.
Did that sort of give you permission to do whatever you wanted to do?
Yeah. Oh yes. No, I was I guess in high school, maybe senior year of high school, perhaps, when I first saw Charles Ludlam perform, and I,
do you remember what it was?
Yeah, it was before he had his own theater space. It was over at Westbeth, just nearby where I live. It was a play called Eunuchs of the Forbidden City, and it was a Chinese epic about the last empress of China, who started out as a courtesan, and Charles played her chief eunuch, Li An, so she could say Lillian. It was incredible. I had read about him. I think in Vogue magazine there was people are talking about the section. I read about this fascinating man, and I just wanted to be in the stage, and I didn't know how I was going to quite achieve that, being this rather androgynous boy, and I'd always written, but I somehow didn't make the connection that I'd write roles for myself somehow. And then when I saw Ludlam, though, I suddenly it was like oh my God, this rush of that, because here we were young actors playing in drag just because they were going to play the part, and it was just and the use of old films as a reference point, and 19th century theater and all the things that I was interested in, and that the theater did not have to be just the plays and musicals on Broadway that I had seen. That it could. The main point I think got from it was just that a theatrical experience could be whatever you chose it to be, and that I could just create whatever world I wanted to be and be in it.
Did you get to know each other? Did you become friendly at all?
Somewhat. I met him. Well, I was at my first stage of my career, since was as a solo performer, because how do you get a play put on? But I thought if I do these kind of dramatic monologues, I could play in a cabaret, even though it doesn't really suit a cabaret because it's all spoken. There's no music, but that was the only thing I could think of, was to sort of try to get booked at the Duplex or something. But so anyway, I wanted Charles Ludlam to see me again, sort of like with Elaine Stritch. I didn't particularly want to work with Charles Ludlam. I just wanted him to think I was talented because I just so worshipped him and thought he was such a genius.
So you never auditioned for one of his plays?
Well, he had his own company. He didn't do auditions.
Same thing as you, right?
He drove his company. So I didn't want to work with him. I didn't want to be friends with him. I don't know what I wanted. I was very young, and I wanted him to think I was talented. That was kind of enough. And so I invited somehow. I'd met him in Chicago when I was going to Northwestern. He and his company came to the University of Chicago, and I sort of met them briefly, whatever. But then so I put flyers up around his theater and just wrote him a letter. He has his own theater now at this point on Sheridan Square, so in the Village. And he came to the show, and my act. But didn't stick around afterwards. I was disappointed, but I was very driven back then, as young people are, and I saw that he was going to receive an award, the Charlie Awards, which it's like for comedy awards, and he was going to get an award. So I dragged my sister to go to the Charlie Awards. It was at some restaurant, and looked around and stalked him and found him and Everett. They were kind of fairly new in their relationship. And so I saw him and I said, I heard you were at my show the other night, and I just want to thank you for coming. And he goes, oh yeah, I know, it's great. And, I just get shy about going back afterwards, but what are you up to? And I said, nothing, and he said, oh, my theater, we've got so much empty space, you should do late shows on weekends at my theater. What? Oh. And he goes, yeah, you should do it. And like, when do you want to start? I don't know, next month. So after we left, I said to my sister, is this for real? Really? So then, I started getting all, worked up, and I got myself on the Joe Franklin show, and I was sent my press release to Michael's Thing publication, the gay bar rags. And so then time was moving on, and I went over to see backstage after he was doing a performance of Camille. I went backstage and I said, hi, remember me? So I guess I open next week. Should we arrange for a tech rehearsal? And he goes, next week? What? He had totally forgotten. And he said, I think you need to talk to our business manager. So I went to see this woman who was totally harassed and overworked. And she said, I'm sorry, we have no money to put on late shows, and you just can't do it. And I just pleaded. I said, you don't understand. I've been on the Joe Franklin show. I've been in Michael's Thing, you don't have to pay anything. I'll supply, my friends will run the lights and run the box office. Just please, just let me.
Just give us the space.
11:30 on Friday and Saturday night. So she said, okay. And so I did that, and I was totally unknown, and, nobody showed up, but I could say that I was somewhere for a couple, weekends. And so he was encouraging to me. And actually it was interesting, was in my solo. And then, later, I did an engagement at another space, and Everett ran the lights and sound for me. He was just very generous. And Charles would pick him up after the show. And the unspoken truth of my solo shows were that I wasn't in drag. I would play all these characters, male and female, tell these stories. And I wasn't really very good as the male characters.
Really?
I kind of, my imagination sort of took flight when I would play the Countess or the old movie actress or various people. But somehow as the old Irish fisherman, I was adequate. But I felt that in these narratives that I was telling, I had to play all the characters. And Charles said to me, well, why don't you just play the female characters? And,
and hire a guy.
Well, just play, it was a solo show.
So write it just for female
stories
characters.
or just female characters. And I was like, no. Yeah, but he was right. And eventually, I stopped doing the solo show because we started doing plays in the East Village and they took off and my career began. And I only played the female character because that was really what I did best. And now I've like in this movie, I'm playing a male character, although I get dressed up in drag several times to pose as in the wacky hilarity. I have to pose as different people. So but it's a challenge for me playing the male character in a way that it is easier for me. I'm more at ease with myself when I play the female character.
You and I talked about that before when you did that play, which I loved so much with, that you just did a reading for, the one with the dead old woman who you impersonate.
Oh, the tribute artist. Yeah.
The tribute artist. Yeah. And I remember it may be the first time I ever saw you play a male role. And
I was in drag. The entire play that I was in drag, I was playing a man, but I was always dressed as the woman that
as her. Well, no, aren't you as a boy at the beginning at some point?
No, never. But what I thought was interesting about that play, what I was trying to do, and a lot of the critics didn't really, weren't going for it, but was that, it was the only time I've done a Tootsie type Charlie Zant story. I always just play a woman. But I thought it would be interesting to take the idea of a man who has to pose as a woman and has to get into drag, and what would it be like to do it where it's not a straight guy who's never done drag before, and who where the comedy is based on that he has to figure out how to do it, or the comedy is also, is he going to be caught without his wig on? Oh, they're coming in. Oh, my boobs are on fire. Or, or there's always a big element in all those stories of kind of a homosexual panic where what happens.
You'll be found out.
A straight man is attracted to.
Oh, that's right. There was the guy, was it the lawyer or the nephew who was flirting with you?
Jessica Lange's father and Tootsie, Charles Durning, is falling in love with him as Dorothy, but it's a staple, or something like It Hot,
right.
Osgood falls in love with Jack Lemmon, Joey Brown. So I just wanted to see what would it be like to do it from a very contemporary point of view, where if the guy was a professional female impersonator and gets this opportunity to pose as this dead woman, so he can get a hold of,
who was in the original production, Anthony Harris, who I adore.
Yeah, and get a hold of the townhouse because he's broke. And what if then there's a straight guy that he's really attracted to, but thinks of him as this old woman, but could he still possibly have sex with the guy without the guy knowing that he's really not her? And
then it becomes M Butterfly.
So I just thought that would be kind of funny and novel, and what I thought was also interesting, I don't know, was that people so often do believe what they want to believe, and so
right.
So I start off with this wig on and these caftans, posing as this very glamorous older sophisticated lady who has a slight,
with the big glasses,
slight European accent, and then all these people come in. It turns out she has a niece who has claims to the house, and she moves in with her transgendered son, and those people. So he starts Jimmy, my character, starts experimenting how far he can go. What if he starts just wearing jeans and just have a man's shirt, but keep the wig on? Will they still believe he's this lady because they seem to buy it? And the more natural he is, the more they're buying it. And then, maybe I'll take off the glasses, or maybe I'll even kind of drop the accent a bit too,
and get a haircut.
Yeah, and so the niece, she sort of falls she starts off very cantankerous, just that, resenting that this her aunt is, going to bilk her out of her inheritance, and then starts to fall in love with, just be so attached to this kind of mother figure who's rather androgynous and that she just wants to believe. So I thought that was very interesting. But
I liked that play very much, and I remember the critics really almost took you to task for trying something new.
Yeah, they wanted it to be. They couldn't get past.
They wanted a typical Charles Busch play. Also, can I just say
they wanted that kind of typical idea of the. I didn't really read those reviews as that much, but I got the gist. I think was just that they felt that why wasn't I doing the stuff where I was being caught out of costume and And the other thing about, first off, it was a very naturalistic play. It wasn't as farcical because it was rooted in reality. And the set, you and I have talked about this before, the set was one of the most beautiful sets I have ever seen. And the detail was so exquisite that, again, gave it that root in reality that I thought it all came together beautifully, but either you bought it or you didn't. The second half, there were some problems. I think if I was going to do it again, I might have changed it a bit. But but it had interesting things in it.
Yeah. Barry Pearl just texted. Hi, Billy. Loved his writing. Did Tail the Owl just swipe? Oh, he did Tail the Owl just swipe at the Laguna Playhouse. So, Barry, thank you. Happy Thanksgiving, Barry. I love Barry Pearl was in the original Broadway production of Grease and in the film of Grease. And he does a lot of regional theater. So I assume he played the husband, presumably.
Oh, no, ask him who were the ladies in it.
Oh, Barry, tell us who the ladies were. We had Charles. We had Michelle Lee and Lainey Kazan finally here. Charles was Lainey Kazan at one point for us when Lainey was sick, and we had Michelle Lee. And I just called Charles frantically and said, "Are you free in an hour?" And you said to me, "Who canceled?" So.
Yeah, so that's the story of my life.
But you were there for us. And Michelle and I talked about you, and we were talking about how much she loved doing that play to come back to Broadway in a Charles Busch play that wasn't a Charles Busch play. That it was a great play.
Yeah, it was a very different genre. Yeah.
And again, but it's funny, isn't it interesting? The critics didn't take you to task for that. Maybe because you weren't in it. Yeah,
they gave me that one. I
wonder why.
Sometimes I think that there's a narrative that people want to be a part of, and I think somehow the narrative that how I was perceived as this kind of drag queen East Village character that he wrote this kind of Neil Simon comedy, and let's be behind it. And it was a funny play, and it was
a great play.
And I think it took that Neil Simon kind of play to another step forward, another place, because it was about this middle-aged couple. It's Allergist and his wife. It's rather well-to-do New York couple, and they end up being seduced by this very glamorous woman,
kooky, eccentric,
and in earlier versions, if another playwright had done it a few years earlier, they would have almost had sex with her, and then it doesn't happen, But I thought, well, let them have sex. Let her have the let her have the gay experience.
Well, what I found interesting about, I revisited it when you did it for Stars in the House with Richard Kind and
Andrew Martin and Faith Prince.
Oh, right. Thank you.
And then we were at my big event exactly a year ago.
I was there. I know.
With Linda Lavin.
Was it this week? It was right before or after Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I think it was like November 19th or something like that.
Yeah. And again, but watching it recently, what I thought to myself was really everybody, except perhaps the mother, everybody is going through their own kind of midlife crisis. You have the husband who's retired and finding what his life is going to be. The mother who really never found what her life was and threw it into her kids, but never had a life of her own. And then this crazy woman who may or may not have a life of her own. And I thought to myself, you're really having three people dealing with what is reality and what is happiness, all really coming together. And when you see it just on screen with these Zoom things and hear just the words, it's so moving on a different level. Because it's hysterical in the theater and it's hysterical listening to it. But when you listen to it, there's a lot of pathos there and a lot of angst that all of them are going through.
Yeah, what's interesting about the Zoom play reading, that this whole new format that we've been forced to see, and sometimes it's successful, and sometimes it's just so dreary, because it can be kind of boring, just seeing these faces, nobody.
I guess, yeah.
All that, but when it works. It is an interesting way of hearing a play. Some plays work better than others for it. If it's too talky, it can get kind of stultifying. But it seemed like that one worked pretty well. But because it is sort of interesting for a performer that it's like being in a movie and just doing your whole play in close up, and
or a radio show.
Yeah, but radio, it's in a way more interesting than a radio show. For the actor,
Yes, of course,
because you are playing and you can do all sorts of rather subtle things as you would do, and I tell you, it was helpful, I think, to me I've done so many of these Zoom plays,
I know,
and then go. I hadn't been in a movie in 12 years, and so making my movie, I think the Zoom was actually kind of a good preparation for
really. Well, it is camera work.
It's camera work, and the more you do them, they become more sophisticated. Now, I haven't done one in a while, but now I understand you have to have backgrounds. The audience won't take unless you have a background, so the uniform things. Well,
go back to our first one. I mean, the first one we did, you were upstairs, you were in a different room. I didn't have any background at all. Yeah. We were just talking and thinking that was enough. And there has been a learning curve that we have had that really is extraordinary, that they look a lot slicker. And I think the slicker they look actually allows you to focus on the conversation more. And I don't know why. But
one of the things, you're not distracted by, like, everybody's in a different environment, and now we do this sort of things where tricks where I'll have like the glass and hand it to you, and all that stuff. And
that was my favorite, when you did Die Mommy Die and you handed the file and then they took the file. I laughed so much. I remember I texted you and you said, "Oh, we worked on that and it worked."
Yeah.
Because that was the first time I saw somebody do that. That was the very first one.
It's like the early days of television or something. Oh, the breakthroughs. Yeah. I mean, I think the Zoom reading will go like silent film. So when live performance returns, we won't need the Zoom. Although there are certain things I think have come out of it that certain meetings I think actually are helpful with.
I think there is aspects of this that will be with us for a long time. And, it's interesting when you watch like talk shows on TV, they're basically the same as this show. And I'm like, wow, it's so interesting that it's leveled the playing field for so many people.
Well, I thought, when we were staffing the movie that I just did, and we had to do interviews with directors, cinematographers, and all the different people involved in the movie. We had to do interviews, and so we did all Zoom things. And I kind of thought it's nice that people are sort of relaxed in their own environment, that they didn't have to select the subway for 45 minutes in the rain to wherever the meeting's supposed to be, and then sit in a waiting room, get sort of anxious, and then finally come in and try to present yourself in a wonderful way. I thought it was kind of nice that you're in your living room talking, and
Well, it's funny. It's something I've always said to actors when they've gone to audition, because I've auditioned, I've been on the other side of the casting table. And what I've always explained to people, first off, all actors should have to be on the other side of that table so that they understand it. But they also never understand. Every casting director wants you to be good. There's not an antagonistic relation. I mean, some are less nice than others, but they want to discover a great person. They are praying you are what they want.
They'll save them.
Yeah.
I know it's so true. I wish every actor could have that experience, because they would see, and they'd also would learn that all the reasons why somebody's not cast. And
it has very little to do with your talent. It's just you're not what we're picturing, or
how you're going to fit in with the other person who's already.
There's a stage picture, right?
How all sorts of things. People do a really great audition, but they're just a little too young for the part.
And you know how many? And I don't know if this happened to you. So many friends of mine have auditioned for things they didn't get. But if you're good, a casting director will remember you later, say, who'd be great for this, and they'll call you in.
Well, what I just read was, have you seen the new season of The Crown?
Yeah, I haven't. I downloaded it.
There's a wonderful young actress, Emma Corrin, I think her name is.
Yes.
Diana. And she's just brilliant. I mean, just brilliant. I read that she actually was just hired as the reader for the auditions. She was just the person the actors were reading with, and that's how they discovered her and gave her the lead. Yeah.
You never know. And speaking, somebody just texted, John wrote, Taylor the Algist wife, did Valerie Harper do it too? And Linda Lavin, they both did. But now that brings up a really interesting point, is what was the difference between the two of them doing that play? Did you find strengths and weaknesses or find new things in the character when Val took over?
Yes. Well, it's interesting that when, I kind of wrote it for Linda Lavin in a way.
Right.
I was writing the play. I didn't know Linda. I was writing the play, and then while I was working on it, I saw her in a play, and I thought, oh, she'd be the perfect person. So I had her in mind, and then we were lucky enough to get her. Although there was about 9 months that she strung us along, that she wasn't sure. It's a huge part, and it wasn't until I played it for one night I thought, I don't know how those dames played that. It's the most killer part. And Linda, in fact,
because you almost never leave the stage.
And she's just screaming and beating her breast. And so, so Linda didn't think she wanted to work that hard. So she kind of kept us on the line for about 9 months and so at a certain point, we started doing readings with other people, including Valerie. But then finally Linda, who was just so perfect for the part. So she did it. And then we were casting for her replacement. So we went to Valerie, and it was a real challenge for her, and she didn't get it quite at first because the character, people often think that she and Linda are sort of interchangeable, and really it's not true.
I recently resaw a Rhoda episode with the two of them so young. Yeah. And so I'm like, you don't think of them as contemporaries, but they obviously are. And very New York and very young.
And that episode shows them absolutely at their best of what they both do and how different they are.
The archness versus the insecurity.
Yeah. Well, so this part of Marjorie in the play is this woman who's going through a midlife crisis, but she's rather pretentious, and she's culturally striving, and and just maybe a little foolish about her. And Valerie, both in life and as Rhoda, is all about anti-pretension.
Right, and real.
Basic, and just telling it like it is. And so it was kind of hard for her to play the kind of foolishness of this woman with her striving of wanting to be an artist and all this. And so it took her a little while, but she was a woman of enormous drive, and she to succeed and to be good and to push herself. And so she worked very hard, and each laugh, just if she wasn't getting a laugh, she had to figure out how to get it. And and she did it. And I eventually she really she was terrific. And she was a very beloved figure, and she sold a lot of tickets. She kept that show running. And then of course she was at the helm during 9/11. And
Oh.
it's interesting now. Here, the theaters have been will be closed for over a year before they come back. But that was the first time the theaters were closed for 5 days, and it was just such a oh my God, the theaters are closed. We're missing a week. Little did we know what was ahead. But when it was going to come back, Valerie, who was sort of like a politician, she was at the forefront of reclaiming Broadway and reclaiming New York coming back, and she was just everywhere.
And I think when you have a beloved person like that who's been in everyone's homes, they're very good in a time of crisis to kind of.
But she defined New York. Rhoda,
right,
definitive New Yorker, and everything that we want.
And she was everyone's best friend.
And Valerie really was so aware. I mean, I adored her, and
I did too.
She was so aware of that she wasn't just an actress, because there are other actresses who are more famous, or more, whatever, but versatile. I don't know what, but she was aware that she was one of those rare performers who represented something, and she kind of represented best friend, and she took that seriously. And I've never seen anyone, quite like that. I've known a lot of these ladies, but every person who'd recognize her on the street, she would like give them 20 minutes. I mean, and it could be a little like, we got the reservation, we got to get to the restaurant. But
no, she never rushed people.
And who are, what do you do, and who are your family, and what does your husband do? She really gave them this wonderful time with her, and I've never seen anything quite like it. And I learned something. I've tried to be a little nicer person, a little more generous, just from being in her.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned the pretension being not part of her general makeup, because I remember when she did Matthew Lombardo's Looped, where she played Tallulah Bankhead, that she worked so hard. But in that case, you were really totally immersed in that character, so you had to play that character.
Well, she was really good in that, and I
thought she was.
I was a little dubious how she was going to pull this off.
I was too.
And I don't know. I like to think that maybe in some way the experience of playing, because she did the whole
Marjorie
of playing Marjorie she did it for about 2 years at least.
Oh wow!
New York and on the road.
Oh, that's right.
And maybe that. Because everything we do helps us.
You build on it, of course.
You build on it. I think that might have been a little bit of help, because I think so. Really, I wouldn't have thought that was a role that she could.
I did not either. Yet she got that perfectly. John continues asking, who else would you like to see in it? And he suggests Lucy Arnaz Jr. or Marlo Thomas, or is she too old?
Well, not she's too old today, but I think that I was told that when we didn't think during the period when we didn't think Linda was going to do the play, that actually the script was sent to Marlo Thomas, who evidently said, "I can't believe they're sending me this piece of shit."
Can I just tell you, last night I was talking to somebody, because when I'm in Florida, when I get up, roughly at noon, at 12 to 1, you get 2 episodes of That Girl, which I haven't seen since the 80s. So I just sit and love it. And a friend of mine said, I have never heard a kind word about Marlo Thomas. And I remember there was that book that, was it her butler or somebody wrote this hateful book.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
I met her once. She was lovely. But,
I've met her a couple times, and it's just like a little conversation. And she was lovely. Yeah, I think she would have been good.
Is there somebody today, if it was being done, that you would want to do that role?
Well, I think. Who was I thinking of recently? Lucy would be good as the Michelle Lee part. I think
so too. Yeah,
she's right for the other one. Oh gosh, there are a couple of Edie Falco, maybe.
Oh, that would be very interesting.
Maybe.
Or Lorraine Bracco, although she could play the other role, maybe.
Yeah, or there was another lady though. Yeah.
What about a Sybil Shepherd?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a specific part. It's very hard. The movie version of it, which it's been dragging on
Oh,
for
can we talk about that?
17 years, was very difficult because
Now, was Sharon going to play that role, or was Bet going to
Sharon
play
Stone
that
was
role?
at one point there was talk about her playing the Michelle Lee part,
And Bet was going to play Marjorie.
Yes. Although Bet used to say that she thought in some ways her persona was actually was closer to the Michelle Lee character.
I agree with you. Yeah.
Just free spirit.
She could do either.
She could do either. Yeah, and it's dragged on. Last I heard, it was kind of on again, but I had gave an idea that because the characters really should be in their late 50s. Really.
Oh, really? I always thought that they were early, like 65, like retirees.
Yeah, it's like, Linda, I think, and Michelle were both about 60 when they did it. And
really?
Yeah, they should be 60.
Okay.
And
that's hard because we don't have character actresses of that age and specificity today, right now.
Well, women in their late 50s today are very different from what they were like 20 years ago. So all the actresses that we were when we were trying to start casting it with women who were in their 50s,
John suggests Marissa Tomei.
Yeah, but they're also
she
young.
Reads young.
They're all still kind of girly, and you just don't quite believe them as that kind of. And I don't think that lady
like Sarah Jessica Parker is almost the right age, but plays so young.
And they don't want to play that part. They don't want to play this kind of unsexy sort of woman who's going to see the ballet folklore go to Mexico. They're not and reading Herman Hesse. They don't want to see themselves as that. So I said to the producer who's been trying to get it made that what maybe they could be in their early 70s and just
play 60.
No, and play early 70s.
Oh,
and change the story.
Would that
change?
People are vital longer now. Yeah, that's true.
Well, the screenplay is very different from the play.
Is it?
Well, it's very opened up and it's very different. And so the daughter who does not appear in the play, we had the daughter who in the screenplay was like in her 20s, became a major character and all this. And so I said, well, maybe she should have a biracial granddaughter,
that would be interesting.
Instead of the daughter who becomes her kind of sidekick.
Now, John is really pushing for Marissa Tomei. She's my dear friend. I know she do. All right, well, get her on, John. If you get in touch with me, we'll make it happen. Now, who do we put opposite Marissa Tomei? Now you need Sarah Jessica Parker.
Yeah, you put them together. Yeah, they're sort of the same generation. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think that would work. And Matthew Broderick could be Marissa's husband.
Yeah,
We've just cast your movie.
Okay, all right, there you have it.
I don't know if I see any of them.
I think they're all too young. I know. Everybody comes off much younger today.
Yeah.
Women, maybe it's a good thing. They don't suddenly feel at a certain age that they have to wear their hair a certain way or whatever. Everybody's kind of, whether you're 80 or 20, you're in the same leggings.
How about Christine Baranski and Nathan Lane?
Done.
Okay. But which role would you put Christine in? She could do either.
Yeah. I don't quite see it, but.
And what about Marjorie? No, I was going to say Marjorie could be black. Talk about biracial. Well, that wouldn't work, though.
At one point, this producer was so desperately trying to set it up that he was saying, Queen Latifah. And I said, no. It's a very specific.
There.
Thing, yeah.
Audra McDonald and Meryl.
Well, Meryl Streep, is the go-to person for everybody, for everything. And, the thing was that we had
Goldie Hawn and Meryl Streep.
They would have been perfect. At one point, this producer, when he first was going to do it, and this was almost 20 years ago. He somehow I wrote this really bad screenplay, and that was submitted to Meryl Streep, and she turned it down. But and then there was talk about Barbra Streisand at one point, and But it wasn't very good. Then we had a whole new screenplay that Midler was involved in, and now it's sort of being rewritten again. I don't know, whatever.
We'll brainstorm. You and I will figure this out.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never been that excited about it. I guess my ego has always been so much more as an actor that I was so desperate to make a movie again, but for me to star in that.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds kind of kooky. Most people wouldn't get it, but because the Alger's Wife movie would be like a really big, like $20 million movie or something.
Depending on this cast, sure.
Yeah, but whereas these movies that I make are, for low budget indie film. But I was
but all your plays were sort of indie, low budget plays until you went to Broadway.
Yeah, but I've just always more interested in being in a movie that I could act in. See,
yeah.
So that's always the thing that I've been so trying to push and being so excited about or being disappointed in when it didn't happen.
Well, because we've talked about that before, that the writing really came from needing a vehicle.
Yeah. So I was just much more excited about getting this movie that I just finished making done than Now It's Life. And most people would think that was really foolish, but did
you get the thrill out of writing a play for Broadway that you would have gotten by performing in an off-Broadway play?
Well, it's a very different thing. I'd never really done it. And it just sort of happened. Like most things in my life, they just kind of, I don't really pursue. They've just kind of, things have happened and it all worked out, because I more and more I've realized, I've had the most odd career and life and it's been wonderful. It ain't over yet, but it's just, I don't really like show business and I'm not really, and I've somehow managed, except for rare occasions, to actually have a full career and in a way not be in show business, because I had a theater company and it was just all my friends.
Right.
And it was not show business. I wasn't, and we produced it ourselves basically. So I wasn't
out of the Charles Ludlam type
I
of
wasn't
theater.
answering to, I never had to answer to somebody. And then then I've been so lucky that I've often been working for nonprofit theaters that just sort of respected me and my director and were inobtrusive and there I wasn't really in show business. And some of the movies I was in were as unshow businessy as a movie could be, where I didn't have all sorts of people to answer to and their 2 cents and the experiences I've had that were more show business, like Taboo, in Broadway or there was a period where I was writing all these TV pilots that never sold, and that was, and I had to answer to 5 different executives giving ridiculous notes and trying to navigate and play like Survivor, like who's the alliance with, and I'll take this, I'll take that note so they think that I'm being team player, so that I can not take that note that's going to be.
So you could get the thing you really want.
Destructive, and I hated all that, and I probably had I not been just such a fragile little flower, I guess I would have had a much more successful career as far as mainstream goes, but I took myself out of the running. I after Taboo, I just thought I'd never ever want to get closer to a Broadway musical than balcony, first row center, and so I've turned down things, and then at a certain point you stop being asked, and
of course
I just didn't want to be I didn't want to be a book writer of a Broadway musical. And then of course I started looking at seeing something's running 10 years. Oh gee, maybe I was foolish not to do that, but I just didn't want to do it. It wasn't the life I wanted to lead. And then in television, I watched the Emmy Awards, and they're all they're all congratulating themselves, and I'm thinking like, oh boy, if I had kept up writing those TV pilots, eventually one of them might have sold, and I would have been zillionaire. But I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to live in LA, and I didn't want to put in my.
Did you
do it?
Somebody just texted me, not on the Zoom. They asked, "Did you enjoy doing the soap opera?"
Well, that was a real shock. I don't pursue. Again, I know I sound kind of loony here, but I don't pursue an acting career. So once, but about every decade, I get just offered something like Oz. I was a regular on Oz for a recurring character for 2 seasons, but that was just sort of offered. They wrote me in. I didn't have to audition or anything. And so suddenly out of the blue, my manager called up and said, "You won't believe this, but this producer from One Life to Live wants you to come on the show and play this woman who runs a modeling agency." What? And I said, "Call back and find out what point do they pull my wig off?" And she's a man, And he called back and goes, "No, they just think that this guy is a fan of yours and thinks that it'd be fun to have you play this kind of Kate Thompson, Roz Russell sort of lady." So I thought, wow, that's really cool. And so I did, I think, 9 episodes. And
was it fun?
Well, the thing was that it was the first thing I had done after nearly dying from heart surgery.
Right?
Aortic aneurysm, having heart surgery. So I was kind of very sort of Judy neurasthenic kind of thing. And so there I was, and I'd never done anything remotely like this. And I didn't have that big a part, but still, it was just scary. After every day, another script comes, and having to memorize these things, and all my lines were kind of the same line in variations of. Why don't you please sit down and make yourself comfortable, and Jen will be coming in shortly. It was all variations of that. So anyway, it was fascinating, and it's a little ruthless. Because at one point there was this beautiful young actor. He was so pretty, and he was love interest to Jen, the character, the young blonde girl who was the lead in my storyline. And I was so nervous that I would say to him, "Hey, come, would you just run lines with me?" Because for our scene, he goes, "All right." So he says to me, "Now, I'm just going to tell you that when we run these lines right now, I'm going to also say my subtext out loud," which is what the subtext is what's the thought underneath your line, which is often different from what you're actually expressing. So I said, "Fine, let's just run the lines," And so I said, "Hello, may I help you? I'm here to see Jen, you dumb cunt." "Well, would you please sit down? Jen is in the middle of a photo shoot. But would you like some coffee?" "Yes, I would, you dumb cunt." I said, "Wait a minute," So
he's got a wide palette of subtext.
So every line was. So then, he does a scene, and the director, told him to toughen it up. I said, "Yeah, remember, I'm the dumb cunt," But then about a few days later, we're shooting this other scene, and it's a big scene, lots of people on stage. It was like a fashion show that I was running, and all of a sudden, while in the middle of the scene, there's a announcement that's on camera and in the set. It wasn't like some sort of voiceover thing, and it says, in today's episode, the role usually played by Joe Smith will now be played by Nicholas Jones. They fired him. And I had no idea that he wasn't there. Then the strange person walked on, and it was the nuttiest thing. It's a strange world of soap opera. That's in the way when you watch like Soap Dish. It's not that, it's not that exact.
See, I think there's got to be a whole chapter about this, and it's only 9 episodes, and yet I would eat all of this up.
Well, what was sweet was because I didn't, I don't know. I didn't think I was so hot, and
for a dumb cunt.
My partner said to me after we started watching the first episode, he said, "Oh, why are you like taking such a strange breath between every phrase?" I said, "Because I didn't know the lines. I was so scared, I was like, Jen, would you?" I was like Joan Crawford, like Faye Dunaway was Joan Crawford on this soap, and then my first entrance, I tripped over the wire. It's okay.
And is the trip in the final thing?
Yeah. But when I finished
I know what I'm going to do.
When I finished my 9 days, the rather tough, grizzled assistant director, I'm saying goodbye. He says, we're sure going to miss you. I said, "Why?" He goes, "Oh, you saved our asses so many times." So how did I do that? And evidently, I took for granted that, I guess not that many people were from the
can
field.
keep going.
Well, because like sometimes like the director would just say to me, like in this fashion show sequence, the main scene was between Jen and her current actor boyfriend, and in the background, I was just sort of in the background organizing all the models, and they just said to me, "Oh, could you just improvise, just
being busy?"
Being busy, and so okay, so I was basically just doing funny face, I was just, darling, you come here, darling, you do something with your mouth, and
bring up the hem.
Thing actors could.
We've lost you for a moment, darling.
Well,
oh wait, there you're coming back. There you are. Hello. What, darling? You're back.
We're back. Okay. Anyway, so yeah, yes. so I guess not everybody, or sometimes the director would say to me, just, "Oh, when you exit, could you just do something?" So, okay, so I'd exit and do some kind of Maggie Smith kind of thing, So I guess not everybody could do that. So I don't know, but I was shocked. I was touched. I thought, wow, I thought I was a big old flop. Yeah.
And Rocky just said that when you froze, I said you froze for a second, but he wrote, "But what a fabulous freeze," because you were like this. It was fabulous, exactly. Okay, we have run so long. I could, as you know, we could just sit here for hours and hours as we do. You know what people don't know is that this is exactly what we would be doing in person. We would be sitting in a diner for like 3 hours. They would look at us like, are these two ever going to leave? Because we can just talk about these things forever. But this is what I think, my favorite shows have been the ones that are A, with people that I already know and love, and B, where we're just talking. And I said to you beforehand, I said, we're just going to keep talking like we're talking backstage. That's it.
Yes, and what you know how to do, I'll flatter you, is just that you don't just go with set questions, that you're actually listening. You're listening, and then you come up with the next thing to say because you're listening. And that's what the best interviewers do. And it's hard to do. It takes experience and a certain confidence in yourself and an ability to listen. Because sometimes I'll do these things where they're not listening to I've answered the next question already but they started asking me the questions. I already answered that, because they're stuck to their script.
Going to I had thank you first. Thank you. When I had Ed Asner on, I have learned that the best shows are the ones that I end and I think to myself, I had an hour's worth of follow-ups that I never got to because the show, you and I have talked about this when you write a show, and I think doing these shows is the same thing, that what you think that show is going to be when you go to write it doesn't always become, a show becomes what it's meant to become. And these shows kind of go the way they're going to go. And you have to trust that it's, the few things that I have written that have been character driven is very often I will write something and I will laugh because I didn't plan for the character to say that, but I'm like, I can't believe she said that. Well, I said it, but
yeah. Well, it's wonderful when that happens. It's sort of rare, and when it does, it's great. But that was one of the things that I enjoyed, in performing Cabaret act, because
that is a conversation with the audience.
Yes, and when I intentionally when I put together Cabaret act, I don't write down the whole script. And I do a lot of talking. My shows are at least 30% storytelling.
Is it that much? I guess it is.
Yeah, a lot. But I write my first couple lines, so I know where I'm starting, and then I write talking points and then I just I rehearse it in my when I'm taking the shower. I just keep going over the
bullet points, the transitions.
I'm not rambling, and then Tom would give me notes too. Sometimes I think, oh, it's funnier if you cut that thing and do that. But the fact that it's not written down too allows me in actual performance to veer off it. If I have an audience that's particularly lively, I suddenly come up with another line. I
You
improvise.
have that freedom.
Yeah, and I love that in Cabaret. It's so different from a play where you really are frozen, and in a way, I find when I do dramatic material on stage, like the last play I did, The Confession of the Leader, got very dramatic in places. It was funny, but also got poignant, and I find I'm actually more flexible in the dramatic places, where
Really?
every night I could do it slightly different, because comedy playing for me has a certain mathematic quality.
And a rhythm.
Yes, and I guess I'm very kind of old-fashioned that way. But for me, I can only speak for myself. There's certain rules that I follow that are rather classic, of landing a laugh and going down at the end of the sentence and not taking a breath and various things. And when I get that laugh in a play, I tend to keep it the way it is and just try to just perform it as good as I can and improve it, but I don't necessarily change it that much.
Tinker with it, right?
Yeah, and so with dramatic scenes, I can play it 20 different ways every night, and I kind of like that.
Yeah, and I think that being able to do Cabaret is such a specific art that it is really closer to stand up and I don't want to say lecturing, because there is more of a give and take, but being exposed as yourself is such a different skill set than acting. I think people assume you can just do that, and there's a lot of people who can't.
Well, you have to really, with Cabaret, I mean, I think you have to figure out, you have to really kind of take a clear view of who you are and what you have to offer. And you have to
be authentic to that.
Yeah, you have to be like 98% who you really are. The other 2% is that you're theatricalizing it. You want to give the illusion that they're in your living room, but it's more you're on stage. So, but and you've edited out certain elements of your personality that may be a little bit drearier. So, but you have to really be who you are, and you have to know what is that product, what is this persona that is who you are, and not a fake.
I had written a joke this past summer that I thought was so funny, but it was something I could not use. And I'm like, oh, I wish this were my persona, because this little bit would be great. But I saw Varla, Jean Merman, in Provincetown this summer, and I realized it was so perfect for her. And I went backstage and I said, I came up with this. And she's like, that would be so funny for me. And I went, it's yours, take it. And she used it and it killed. And I'm like, you write something as a writer, that this is funny, but you also know it's not you.
Yeah, there's certain things I've done where I realize it, and don't get a laugh. When I first started doing my plays and performing with female characters, and this was mid '80s, and there were a couple times I thought, maybe it'd be kind of funny to sort of remind the audience for a second that I'm a guy, and sort of lower my voice, and it just died, and I realized for me, the audience wants to believe. And they don't want it. It wasn't another performer could get away with that. For me, they don't want that. They just want.
They buy into the conceit. Walking.
I am that lady, and just do it well, and don't. So yeah, that was interesting.
Speaking of which, just last thing, because I can't. You and I again, we can do this forever.
I know.
When you and Julie started out doing Vampire Lesbians, could you have switched characters?
No.
Would it just not have worked?
No, she couldn't have done that. No. It was.
Could you have done her role?
Yes, I could have, but there's still, Vampire Lesbians was such a weird thing. It was just, I threw this together to play for 2 nights in this bar, in Avenue C, and so I just needed lines to say. I wanted to I'd been to this crazy bar art gallery space, and I just thought it was so cool that I just wanted to do a show there, asked the owner if he could give me 2 nights, and he did. And then what do I do? And I could have done my monologues, but I don't want to do that. I want to be outrageous and decadent. I'll do drag. I'll write a little play, a little skit that I can put friends in. So what do I do? And it was just elements of things that interested me. I thought, I could maybe, and what can we do for zero money? That was the other thing.
Yeah, right.
Zero. I mean, not $10, zero. So, So what do I have? What do I have in the drag box here? Okay, well, I've got that skirt, and I could wrap that around. And that could be kind of 1920s. All right, so we'll do a scene set in the 20s. So I kind of came back with characters that I'd already could, sort of the grand dame of the theater that I'd already played, that I knew was just in me, or this virgin sacrifice. I thought I'll play it like it's supposed to be ancient Sodom, but I'll play it like a burlesque sketch because I'm fascinated by Gypsy Rose Lee and strippers.
And it's so interesting juxtaposing that character into that time period.
Yeah, so that'd be funny if I'm sort of playing. I'm Charles Busch, but I'm playing sort of a burlesque stripper doing a scene where she's playing a virgin. So I'll wear, and I was so thin that I was basically naked. I just
little pasty-ish things.
And of course, I had the long wig that's covered my bare chest, and then I was wearing a G-string. I took a piece of just tulle netting and wrapped it around in a big bow to cover my crotch, but my ass was showing. Then I put on spike heels, and that was the costume. So I could sort of play it like, I'm the virgin, like I'm in this burlesque sketch. So they were all just things that I didn't have to be taught. They were just in me that I could do, that I would have entertained my friends with as an improv. And
well, I think that's that's where the best things come from. It's the things that you would do for your friends that would make them laugh.
Yeah. And then, Julie, when I didn't write she wasn't in it that first weekend. We had another actress, and then that we wanted to do a second weekend, and that actress wouldn't do it. So
yes,
I was very desperate. And the last person I could think of was this girl who I'd only met a couple times before, who wasn't an actress. She worked on Wall Street, but she maybe would she do it? Didn't matter. So that was Julie, and then I started rewriting it more. We did those couple weekends, and then we were going to do it again, and this time I started thinking about what was funny about her in real life, and in the way she would talk about her mother from Comac, Long Island, or just Julie in conversation, who's kind of like a demented talk show hostess. Like she is in conversation. She would say, Charles, thoughts and reflections upon the death of Marvin Gaye. Just that's sort of, and she was so funny. So I just started writing in
for that voice
for her to do what I call her trip, and that's her Comac, Long Island lady who can be very grand, and it's also
and yet common.
And it's also sort of the precursor to the Linda Lavin character, Alger's wife, and that's certainly.
And if people are interested in this, Charles wrote a great novel, which is called Whores of Lost Atlantis. Here was my favorite cover of it. And you can get the book. And he really talks about the genesis in a fictionalized way of Vampire Lesbians of Sodom and how the whole thing got started.
Yeah, so it's been that was another thing that's been hard with this book I'm writing that's supposed to be my true story, because I had sort of told it already in fictional form, but very exaggerated and fantasy.
So funny, such a funny book.
It's interesting telling it again, but just the truth of it.
But warts and all, I think. But again, you can't help but be amusing. I'm sorry to say.
But I can go back, and even there, I think I can go back and be a little more, just a little tougher.
Well, don't take the laughs out, whatever you do.
Never do that. I can be a little tougher. Yeah.
Charles, I adore you. Though, you know what I'm thankful for? I'm thankful that we not only got to do this today, but we've done this like 4 or 5 times. And, reconnecting with people who I love and admire has really kept my sanity through this pandemic. And so I'm really thankful for that.
Well, yes, I just, I love that we're friends, and it's just, I adore
You know, and to go back, a little throwback to your stories, when you and I first met, to be liked and admired and get a compliment from Charles Busch, like that's all I wanted. All I wanted was somebody for you to say to me, you know, you're so funny and clever. I'm like, that's it. I could retire now.
I don't remember how we met though. Just
I don't. I think
I've known you now.
I know it's been so long. I know that I've come to see your plays and written about them, but then you also discovered my column and were complimentary to me. So it just worked both ways. And like you said, there are people that you admire that you also, just the fact they admire you is enough. And you were more than enough
to work with. Yeah, that was the thing. I don't need to work with them. You just want them to just like you and think you're interesting or talented or whatever, you know.
And certainly I not only like you, I love you, and I think you're so talented, and I'm thankful that I get to call you a friend.
Yes, absolutely. And I tell you, sometimes on a Monday morning, I'm kind of a little, I know it sounds kind of, it's true. I just really look forward to on Monday mornings, which sometimes Monday mornings can be a little grim, you know, the week starting, and for various reasons you not looking forward to what's going to happen this week. I really look forward to your column on Monday morning. It's the first thing I do. I wake up, first get on the computer and see what's Billy's outrageous thing is Billy writing about today.
Well, can I tell you, one of my favorite things is when I get an email from you and you will like quote a line and you said, I just laughed out loud reading that. And I'm like, what more do I need? That just sets my week off in a perfect way.
Yeah. And I so look forward to it. So.
Well, thank you. And thank you for doing this. This was fun. And it just made me feel like a real person for a little part of Thanksgiving.
So we've had a nice Thanksgiving after all.
We did indeed. Cheers to Charles Busch.
Yeah.
Where's your glass? Do you have a glass there?
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay. Bye bye. Hope the rest
and one for Mahler.
No, I gotta eat.
I know, me too. Sweetheart, thanks for playing. And I'll talk to you soon, obviously.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Bye, honey. Happy Thanksgiving. And thank you everyone for joining me for a little surprise show that I didn't expect to do from my sumptuous Fort Lauderdale abode. So you got a little bit, hold on. It wouldn't be Thanksgiving without playing with my balls. So I'll play with the hairy ones later. Thank you all for watching. Happy Thanksgiving. Take care of yourselves. Find joy wherever you can. It's out there, even if you've got to play with some big balls to have a little joy. And we will be back hopefully next Tuesday, December 1st, with the first Diva of December. Until then, take care, stay safe, and don't forget, this was Billy Masters, and if we're here, we're live. Bye, guys.